too. Thank you so much. As I was introduced, I'm Amir. The team is Virtuleap. We initially kind of launched not as the standard XR metric, as I'm kind of going to introduce you to, but actually our beginning began as more of a community builder, more as an online hackathon that was completely devoted to pushing WebVR, which at the time, which was around, I guess, mid-2016, wasn't so big in the news, wasn't so supported, and didn't have much visibility, at least from people not in the know, not on the Slack groups, not on the WebVR mailing groups. And I basically stumbled across WebVR through A-Frame, Mozilla, and it kind of blew me away when I first saw it. I was kind of like, because I'm not a technical guy by background, I'm more on the sales and marketing and publishing side, and I'm suddenly seeing a cross-platform application of virtual reality. It was kind of mind-boggling how that wasn't the main use case for the industry. Why wouldn't you use that in terms of, you got the walled gardens, and then you got this. You got this that can be shared to everybody. You make something pretty easily using just JavaScript, and then you can just share the URL, and your friends have it. I mean, distribution is solved, right? And the situation for the industry is the opposite. We got 2/3 of all VR content right now made through the game engines, and they look sleek and awesome, but it's really a huge barrier in terms of getting developers out there to create. And WebVR makes things much simpler and gets a lot of people who might have not become potential creators to become and start looking at themselves as creators. So we didn't know where we wanted to go. We wanted to support creators and to promote content supply. So we launched the hackathon that ran from the end of 2016 through the early part of 2017. It was in partnership with, of course, Samsung Internet, along with all of the really cool, bright minds in the VR community. Google, Mozilla. Mozilla was actually one of the first. And we ran it with not much of an expectation. We kept it open, general, in terms of what categories you could create in. It could be tooling platforms, it could be entertainment-based, it could be enterprise, it could be AEC. And we just ran it to see how the cards would be dealt. We received 34 concepts from 13 countries, and it was, 50% came from the US, and that's not surprising, to be honest. My background is very much focused on mobile games publishing, some market research, and then when I got into the VR and AR side of things about 2 years ago, I more or less entered it from the media side. I write for blogs like VentureBeat and TechCrunch, and I started writing about WebVR. And I try to make updates about WebVR. And the latest things now, I'm even writing more about it because this WebXR API is just blowing my mind. Cross-modality experiences and all this stuff that a marketing guy can obviously write about in much more sensational terms, what the possibilities are. Whereas my audience right now, today, they can probably keep my feet on the ground. My co-founder, who's a WebXR engineer based in France, Thomas, he'll do a good job at keeping me using safer words and making safer promises. But the whole point of the hackathon was to figure out what on earth is happening, what is the landscape of what people are creating, what are the most practical applications. And what we found was actually something's really pissing people off, especially developers and users, and it's like the emergence of disruptive ads as the primary monetization model. This is actually not that example yet, but there's these companies, a lot of them in the Bay Area, and they're doing great stuff. They're finding use cases that at least make money so that we at least have an industry, which you can't blame them for that. But they are focusing on, for example, 360 VR formats that completely disrupt your experience. So from the point of view of a user, you're going to enter an immersive world or experience that the developer wants you to get lost in, and no, 30 seconds into it, you have to be disrupted into a 360 VR ad about a Hyundai, automobile and what the latest features are, and then you're back into Wonderland, you're like, what just happened? I don't think that's what we are looking for. I don't think what the people who have, the geeks and the nerds and the dorks like myself, when we think about the metaverse or Ready Player One, I don't think that's the future we want. We want to avoid dystopia advertising at all costs. So we were thinking, like the guys at Google Area 1, the 120 team, they were doing a lot of studies and experiments and figured out the same thing. You know, developers and users don't want that. They don't want things to disrupt and interrupt and distract. We thought what they do want is the product placement model. That would be a more feasible model long term, something that allows the same thing that happens in TVs and in movies, where product placement is a seamless advertising model. It doesn't interrupt anything. You can notice it, you might not notice it, but brands find a value in having themselves there, and it's a kind of a win-win for everyone. And in VR and AR, there's a real good chance of being able to now do something that never was possible before, which is create a metric that can allow visibility and transparency for both sides of the stick of where is the attention going, is that valuable positioning. You can do a lot more. You can give a lot more value to those advertisers, and those advertisers in return don't have to attack the integrity of the content experience, and the user experience. So what we did was to kind of help promote the product placement model, we thought that metric was kind of missing. No one was really tackling it yet. So we began, Thomas began in particular, formulating and developing what that algorithm would be in the setting of a immersive reality. We called it the Gaze At Ratio. Ratio itself is not necessarily the right word. It can misdirect you to thinking ratio is just 1-to-1, right? To numeric over denominator. But what actually we do is the algorithm takes a variety of variables like the distance, the duration, the depth, and the viewing angle of a user to a 3D object to score how much attention they pay to it. So, and we are basically scoring attention in the most intuitive way we think is possible, which is 0 to 10. So if basically an object is really attractive and it's getting a lot of attention, then it's going to be a high score. Everyone can understand what a 9 out of 10 means, what a 7 means. If you get a 3, you got to do some work. Maybe it's supposed to be a 3. I don't know how the whole thing is designed. You're going to have a bunch of objects, and all you have to do is basically take our code, which right now is 100% WebVR based, take a couple lines of code of A-frame, plug it into an object, and boom, during the span of an experience, you can then score how much attention an object received. So let's see if this is okay. This is like when we first, we're in town actually, not to meet you lovely people, but we were accepted to the Boost VC Accelerator in San Mateo, and we're developing kind of the Gaze At Ratio and our publisher platform to be able to enable content creators to easily just plug and play the code where they may. This is a web AR case where obviously the Stormtrooper at Boost VC was welcoming us, and we were able to plug it in with some GAR, the GAR-powered Stormtrooper, and at the end of the experience, you'd be able to see how it scored. But of course, the platform itself is real time. So yeah, the initial use case that drove us to developing the Gaze At Ratio is to solve the monetization issue, so we can avoid dystopia hell, or whatever you want to call it, and instead have a way for them to just kind of bleed right in and make everyone happy, and at least give developers a way to make a living. A/B testing became something that we realized very, very early on was actually a perfect case example that a lot of developers who had no interest in monetizing their content could use it for. So it became less about monetization and more about creating a platform that can be used in a bunch of ways with the same purpose of measuring and valuing attention and having that metric drive whatever it may. So if it's in terms of package testing, fine. If it's in terms of making sure that the cinematic experience needs certain objects to be really visible and really top of mind, then this can help you get there. It's really about understanding the flow of attention between users and 3D objects, which I believe even if someone is not at all interested and maybe is allergic to the topic of monetization, at least they can find value there. We didn't expect it to be used in other ways, like as a content trigger. Janus VR, which I'm sure a lot of you know very well, they're building in their own particular way their vision of how to create, how to enable content creators to create worlds filled with traversal linking and interconnected experiences. And they're interested not necessarily at all with the monetization. I think they're absolutely not interested in monetization, but they are interested in how can the Gaze At Ratio as a metric be used as a content trigger. So for example, and to assist the content narrative, can attention be used that so a certain GAR score, like say 7, triggers an animation. It can be used in certain ways that we didn't really think of at first. And to be honest, when we spoke to some developers at, like, let's say GDC for more heavy-duty games, I think it's less and less applicable in those settings. But perhaps it can be used in particular restricted ways. So we launched the alpha version of our publisher platform last month. We have clients, well, I guess partners, who are using it exactly for the use cases I've just outlined, particularly A/B testing and content triggering or gameplay mechanism. And the monetization side of things would be a more complicated solution. We're talking with people like NextVR who are even outside of the WebVR universe, because we do think when we go approaching WebVR, we're trying to say, well, WebXR now, we are talking about everyone, cross-collaboration, cross-reality, cross-device. No one should be restricted. That's the whole philosophy of WebVR, and it doesn't make sense that we would exclude Unity while having that philosophy. So we're going to try to be WebVR and WebXR first in everything we do, roll out that way first, and then also try to be supportive of the whole ecosystem. Because as it is now, if we do have a metric that adds value, we should try to add value to not just 1/3 or 1/10 of the market, which I think WebVR is still growing. We should try to support the rest. The team, just to give you a sense, we have 3 founders and 3 support team, and some advisors, and what we're basically doing is simply launching out here to see where the Gaze At Ratio makes sense, who can we work with to run pilot campaigns. We just want every kind of vertical and category represented, and to figure out what use cases work the best. And to be honest, as a VentureBeat writer, I have seen a lot of companies come and go, die with great ambitions, great vision, and it's great. You know, it's awesome to have a utopian picture of what you want. But making money or figuring out how your failings are happening, it requires an understanding of attention, and more importantly, the flow of attention, and how you can improve or modify or maximize the chance that your user experience is exactly as you intend. And I think the Gaze At Ratio is going to help you take you there. So thank you so much. If you would like to participate or know any particularly WebVR content creators, WebXR, we love the WebAR applications as well. Please contact us at pilot@virtuleap.com, and we'd love to discuss it with you. Thank you.